In this photo editing demonstration, you'll see how to use both global and local adjustments inside Lightroom to do contrast and tone control of a landscape image. The main challenges with this image is reducing contrast while maintaining detail in both the bright highlights and the dark shadows, and not overdoing it. Watch as I take the image from this to this final version. I'll show you how to use Lightroom's global adjustments to fine-tune the overall contrast range of the image, and how to use local adjustments such as the Radial filter to do tone control in individual areas. Hi, I'm Darlene from Digital Photo Mentor, and I help beginner and intermediate photographers like you to improve your photography, right from the capture in the camera through to the final editing process and the finished image. The image I'll be using for this demonstration was submitted by a subscriber for one of my recent weekly photo editing live streams. Thanks so much for allowing me to use your image. The image itself is very contrasty, but because it's a raw file, there's lots of data. So I'm pulling this down to make sure that I have detail in the highlights, and then I'm going to pull it up and bring that up into the shadows. And I would probably go even farther because I don't want to go too far that it starts to look sort of muddy. So one of the things that drives me crazy with people that do like faux HDR. Faux HDR is when you go over the top and it starts to look like really like this and something like this. Okay, so please do me a favor and don't make things like this. To me, this is what I call neon puke, and my eyes hurt when I see color like this. Okay, so tone control is about keeping the details where you want them. Okay, so when I dial down the highlights here, okay, you'll see that there's nothing clipping anymore. I also lowered the exposure. Okay. Now, I have two options. I can keep the exposure where it is and the rocks are exposed nicely, but the water is still overexposed. Not too bad. Or I can lower the exposure a little bit, right? Like so. I want to make sure to keep some blacks, right? Let's keep some whites. And then I can start to use radial filters. Okay, so I use those radial filters that I used on the bird a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to draw one here, double click, and bring the highlights down even more. So if your highlight slider isn't doing enough, okay, you can do a local adjustment, either with the brush or with a radial filter like this to bring the highlights down even more. And I'm going to enhance the texture and the clarity to bring out that water. Okay, now I can also right click on it and duplicate it. Okay, so it takes it even farther. So now look at that water. Okay, let me just turn off the radial filter to see what that's doing. Okay, I can duplicate it one more time. And I'm actually going to make it up here in the sky because I want to bring the highlights down in the sky, but not the texture. So I want the highlights up here darkened, like so. Right. And then if I wanted to bring out some detail in this rock, I could actually do the opposite. Okay, so I could increase the exposure here. Okay, maybe even bring it over because part of the waterfall is in the sun and part is not. Right, so I can kind of brighten up the part that's not and bring your eye there. So all the things that I'm doing here are about tone control and drawing the eye in to where you want them to look, your viewer to look. Right. The other thing I'm going to add is a vignette, and I'm just doing that with a quick preset here. And this is in my Lightroom set of presets. I'm going to do a flip on this one like I did on the last image. Okay, because again, I want the water sort of flowing left to right. And I'm going to take a little bit off this side because the waterfall is dead smack in the middle again. So I want it off-centered. Keep the rock on the left as sort of a nice base. And I like it flowing into this position here. Okay, so the composition is really nice. It's now framing the waterfall. I might even go a little darker on my vignette. And let's warm the image up a little bit, like so. Okay, so there's the before, really bright and contrasty. But when you shoot a raw file, okay, you get lots and lots of detail. I'm going to go in here to lens corrections because I think I'm seeing some chromatic aberration here. So I'm just going to check that off. And yes, I did. Okay, so when I choose profile correction, it also finds that if your lens is known, okay, it's chosen the correct lens, which it was. That's the right lens. And where I'm looking at, I'm just going to zoom into 200% here. I saw a tiny sort of blue fringe or green fringe at the top of the mountain here. Let me just turn this profile off, or the chromatic aberration off. Do you see that blue fringe there? And over here, there's a little purple fringe. Okay, so when I check that off, now it's gone. Okay, so I would apply chromatic aberration on pretty much every image that I do, right? If you want to see more in-depth tutorials about Lightroom's local adjustment tools, such as the Radial filter, watch this video now, or the graduated filter, watch the video below now.